Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Zach, and here we talk about overlanding, gear, builds, DIY, all sorts of stuff related to modifying your vehicle. And as you know, I have been a big supporter of C4, and over the years, C4 has begun to work with me more and more. So it's been really fun to be a part of kind of their company in a much more involved fashion this particular year. And so as you all saw a couple of videos ago, I added the high clearance additions to my low pro bumper. I believe I bought that low pro bumper like almost 2 years ago on a Black Friday sale, and I've loved the thing ever since. There's kind of a big decision that comes about when you're buying armor, and that's whether you decide to choose heavy armor versus lightweight armor, which is typically steel armor versus aluminum armor. And it's exciting to see that C4 is starting to branch out a little bit into some aluminum pieces. And they've just released a brand new Tacoma line that looks really cool. It's gonna be more like lightweight. So go check that out. They just released it, I think, this week on Wednesday. I'll have that link down below. I don't know if there's anything on their website that'll show that, but I'll maybe link their Instagram post down below, kind of revealing that. So today we're gonna be talking a little bit about skids, maybe an approach to take when purchasing skids that might be helpful to you, or might just provide you with a little bit more guidance in how I went about sort of the process of, trying to pick out which skids I wanted. And so one thing I will say is that on most of the OEM vehicles, the skids are basically non-existent. If you have a TRD Pro, I think it's only TRD Pro 4Runners, they come with a skid. If you've seen my skid in a lot of past content, that is just an OEM TRD Pro skid that was silver originally that I spray painted black. So it was nothing fancy or weird, literally just rattle can textured sort of maybe matte black or satin black spray paint. You can do that and it makes it look pretty sweet. But that's about the only coverage you're gonna get, and then you're gonna need to look into skid plates. Now, a lot of people will now start to really debate whether you buy aluminum or steel. And one thing that I've kind of come to realize, and I've heard from a lot of guys, is if you don't do incredibly challenging off-road trails, or you never experience anything high clearance, then aluminum skids are probably ideal for you because they're going to be lighter weight and you're not going to probably ever ruin them or really scratch them. They're more just a last resort safety. If you're someone who's going to be doing some things high clearance and it just kind of depends, or maybe your vehicle's already lighter weight, you probably won't be harmed by running steel skids. But you kind of start to come into this weight balance and also coverage balance. So I know people who have ran full aluminum skids that absolutely mangle them and have gone through a few sets. And if you have money to burn and you want to save the weight, then maybe running aluminum skids would be just fine. I do know, forget his Instagram, but he recently posted, he banged up really bad steel skid and steel bumper. And so one thing that you will want to note is sometimes when you mangle up a skid, it may not come off as easy as it went on, and you'd hate to have to start cutting bolts and things of that nature. So I think sometimes, taking on and off old skids that have been completely destroyed can be a real hassle. So those are just some of the things that first come to mind when I talk about, or think about at least, picking between steel versus aluminum. I think a lot of guys end up kind of deciding, am I going to buy steel, which is really heavy duty and I'm probably not going to break, but it is heavy, and so I have that trade-off, or are you going to spend more money on aluminum and probably end up buying more sets? It just kind of depends on your use case, what sort of trails you like to do, and what your tolerances are for weight, MPG loss, power output from the engine, those sorts of things. So those are my 2 cents on kind of picking aluminum versus steel. C4 currently only makes steel sliders, and there's a lot of peace of mind, in my opinion, with running steel, because even if you are willing to mangle aluminum sliders, at some point the slider may not do its function and you'd hate to actually damage, engine or transmission or other internals that you're really dependent on to get to and from your destination. So I've decided that the trade-off in weight isn't necessarily too much of a bummer for me. All right, guys. Well, I've got the 4Runner up on the lift, and we're gonna start putting on a skid plate here. So I've got a TRD Pro, which means it comes with the TRD Pro skid plate. Now, I've removed a couple things. I just want to show you what those were. So skid plate bolts in here with 4 bolts that poke through the bottom of the skid plate. They're pretty easy to remove. They're a 14 millimeter.
Then if we come in here, there's 2 supports, and if you have a diff drop kit, you probably have spacers on these. These are, I believe, a 16 millimeter front and rear, so there's 4 bolts there as well. If you have the TRD Pro skid plate, you probably don't have the underbelly skids. If you're trying to know how to take off those skids, and I'm not giving you a demonstration, the C4 fabrication video shows it with just the stock, you know, entry-level skid. And if we come over here, I removed the 2 cross-member supports. If you've ever worked on your rig, you know that these you have to kind of work around when you put a jack stand up here. There's 2 small bolts right there. They're 12 mil, or they're going to be 1/2 if they're really rusty. Same with back here. As you can see, I've broken off a few of them. Over here, thankfully, I got both of those out, and then I broke both of those off. This cross member right here in the middle, we're going to use and bolt to, so ideally these ones get saved and the other ones can break off. They're a 12 mil, like I said, and a lot of dust and rock can pretty easily bounce up in here. You can kind of see how many holes and openings there are in this cross member. So something to maybe think of, even if you're not doing skids, is every now and then maybe get up and wash inside of there with a pressure washer. Wasn't really aware of this, but you start to see all of the things when your vehicle's up on the lift. So that's what I've removed so far. We're gonna start by putting on the front skid and then make our way back.
All right, so you can kind of see, try and show you a decent angle here. One of those black plates with a washer and a flange nut go up on top of this cross member, and it's a super long carriage bolt that threads right through on the underside there. So the front skid is actually very little hardware. And then we've got 4 carriage bolts with a washer and nut on the top. Now we just have to kind of let that hang there. And you can see it's just sitting there. We're gonna put in this new bolt-on cross member that comes with the system, and there's a transfer case skid with it that we bolt onto the cross member prior to putting it up. I guess this is what the guys recommend, that just makes it a little bit easier rather than doing it the way that the original install video talks about it. Make sure to loosely connect this cross member to the skid. So I didn't show this last step of mounting up the skid, but it's really just like 4 or 5 of these carriage bolts with the washer and the flange nut. And then I used my electronic ratchet, the Hercules tool that I show all the time, because they're kind of hard to get to, and it just would be so much easier to not have to swing a wrench, so that helps. Okay, well, we've got the gas tank skid here. And as you can see, this is the stock skid, and what we're basically doing is attaching these 3 leg brackets, so to speak, with a carriage bolt, washer, and flange nut, and it mimics the 3 mounting points on this OEM skid. And this is quite flimsy. I lifted it, I mean, you can see, can lift it with like 1 finger. Really small. Gas tank skid here is super beefy. I'm gonna probably have a second person hold it while I put the bolts in. It's on the heavier side. So like I said, not too much hardware in this, just these 6 mounting holes. You'll see 3 are these feet, and then there's 3 on a tab over there. So all right, let's get this held up and get it mounted. Lastly, installing this gas tank skid, you want to actually prioritize these 3 bolts on the side next to the slider, and you're probably going to have to loosen up your slider to do this. I would prioritize putting these bolts in and put them in loosely so that you can get everything else tightened on the rest of the skid and the slider. All right, so we've got our diff skid stuff laid out here, and the diff skid kind of orients in this direction. There's 2 brackets, and they kind of wing like this, and so the left wing kind of sticks out, and same with on the right here. And then we have this bracket. Not quite sure on the orientation. I'll kind of specify that later. Then we've got this diff actuator protector or skid. So that'll go right here with just a little
extra hardware here. So this is 2 carriage bolts, 2 washers, 2 flange nuts, just in this separate bag, and we'll use that to secure this little protector.
Just get it to sneak up here and like kind of hook. Right. Oh, there we go. Yep. Sweet. So this is kind of the orientation of the bracket. You can kind of see it sits right behind sort of the start of the exterior of the pumpkin. See it right in there. So your third member kind of starts right there, and this bracket will go right behind it. It'll also kind of be obvious once you line up your lower bolt for your drain on the differential. But that looks pretty good. We've just kind of finger tightened these carriage bolts here in the back with a lock washer and the nut on both sides. Had to remove the little skid plate, sort of protective plate on the actuator. That was 2 12mm bolts and then this 14mm nut up here. And then we've also loosened each sway bar's bolts just to provide a little extra space so you can slip this tab up in between there. So, all right, now time to put the 2 little brackets on the sides. So now you just crank them all down, or what's the tightening situation here?
Yep, you just start cranking them down.
Huh. One thing I will mention that kind of shocked me that maybe some of you have experienced, please comment down below if you've experienced this, but if you look under sports cars, or I think even a lot of daily drivers nowadays on modern cars, they will panel the entire bottom portion of the vehicle in like a plastic skid of some kind. And I think this really helps with the aerodynamics of the vehicle and improving gas mileage. And one thing that I noticed was, after I went out to C4 and I added hundreds of pounds of steel armor to my vehicle, I still am getting the exact same gas mileage I was before I added any of that weight. And the only thing that I can really attribute that to is the aerodynamics being either maintained or improved by doing full underbelly skids, because there must be sort of wind drag that will catch up under your vehicle around the area of the transfer case and the transmission and even the gas tank and the rear sort of differential area. There must be air that will go under the front of your vehicle and then get caught up under that space and, you know, cause drag on your vehicle. So it's been really interesting. I haven't seen a dip in gas mileage at all since adding all of this armor, and I think it has to do with running skids. So if you're a guy out there who also is just trying to improve your aerodynamics of your rig and you're kind of nitpicking all the things you mount on your rack, when I have Roam cases up on my rack, I'm still getting pretty good gas mileage. So I think that's just kind of a testament to the fact that you have to carry about the drag under your vehicle and not just the, you know, drag over your vehicle. And a lot of people talk about the losses you see when you lift. Well, maybe you can kind of gain back some of those losses by doing skids. So whether you're someone who daily drives a lot and you don't want a lot of weight, you could potentially just add aluminum skids to your vehicle and improve your daily driver mileage. So that's something I saw. I don't have a lot of data to show for that. I'm sorry it's so hand wavy. I try to do stuff fairly non-anecdotal, but for this case scenario, I've just been watching my scan gauge on my screen, and when I drive to and from work and on the highway, you know, I'm typically getting 15 to 16 miles per gallon with my 35s re-geared on 488s with all my steel armor. And before I went out to C4 and after, both of those times, before the armor, after the armor, the mileage has basically been unchanged. So it's pretty awesome, and that's kind of how I've been collecting that data, but haven't really captured it other than that. I haven't tried to do any sort of other tests. So that's gonna be a wrap for this video. I will say for sure that gas tank skid is really nice. The gas tank skid has got to weigh a third of the total weight under there. It's very heavy, but it does its job. And when Wes and I went out and did just a little bit of trails locally after we gotten everything on there, you've maybe seen some photos of that on Instagram. I was dragging that gas skid before anything else, and there's a couple gouges in it, and it's done its job to really protect the gas tank. So it's pretty crazy. The gas tank skid that's on there prior is absolutely pathetic. You know, if you're gonna drag your gas tank on anything, it's gonna demolish that skid real fast. So I really like this full skid package. I've been waiting for this, and I've been really excited to get it because it's gonna provide me a lot of peace of mind on going on any trail other than a forest road. So huge shout out to C4 for continuing to support me. If you're interested in getting any of these C4 products, I have a discount code. I'll link it down below. It's OVLDENG. And yeah, that will provide you 5% off your order, and it also helps to support me. A lot of what I do, I try to get sponsored if I can, because it helps me be able to make more repetitive content, because not everyone out there is making, you know, consistent content you all can enjoy. At the same time though, I really try to pitch companies that I care about and not so much just wait for someone to slide into my email or DMs asking if I'll try out a product. So I try to retain that level of sort of, you know, non-bias, or at least doing my research on products that I care about, and I'm asking those companies if they would be interested in sponsoring it to test it out. Not so much that I'm basically just being bought by a review where people will reach out to me. So I try to maintain that. I know some of you out there have commented in the past, like, Zach, you do a lot of videos where you're just covering a sponsored product. Like, basically this is just the ads, you know, page at this point, but it's not really so true. I've really tried to I've written so many proposals to companies because I want to work with them, and it's a way for it to help offset my costs so I can continue to make this sort of content. And if I had unlimited money, I could just buy all this stuff and make all the videos, but I don't, unfortunately. So I do what I can, and I try to make as honest content as I possibly can, and hopefully you all are continuing to enjoy it. I will say this, I've got some pretty cool DIY projects that are just around the corner, especially on the Land Cruiser. So I think some of that stuff will be really kind of fun to see, and I'm gonna maybe branch out a little bit, and it won't necessarily be so off the shelf, you know, bolt on or whatever you want to call it. So thank you so much for all the support, everybody. I really appreciate it. It's been fun. I noticed recently I've made almost 180 videos. It's just really wild. And yeah, thankful for all your support and what's got me here to be able to make this sort of content. So thank you. I appreciate it really sincerely, and I'll catch you all in the next video.